So thank you guys all for joining us today. We are going to talk about data retention, data storage, and everything pertaining to the projects that we're doing around data. So we'll talk a little bit about policies, technical solution, and project implementation. We have a panel to discuss this today. So Emmy, Chris, and John will each be talking about these projects at their universities and their experiences. After they've had their presentation, then we'll take questions and discussions. And then once we're done with that, we'll give some updates about the PMCG. So with that, I will hand it over to Emmy. I'll stop sharing.
Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, now I see it.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're at. Everybody, I'm in New York, so good afternoon for me. Um, I am Emmy Flores from Rochester Institute of Technology, in case anybody doesn't know me. I'm just going to be sharing some high-level insights on some of the initiatives and some of the projects we've done related to file storage retention and just general things that we have thought through and some themes that I've been seeing across the board for these initiatives. So when I talk about data storage and file retention, we've specifically had projects around Google Drive, Microsoft storage quotas, and currently I am working on one for Zoom Cloud right now. So that's the scope of services that we're talking about. I'm happy to get more into detail once we get into Q&A. So for each of these projects, there's been a mixture of folks in different teams that we've had involved. So for each of the services, so Google Drive, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Zoom, we have a designated service owner in IT for each of those services. They've sort of been the ones that have been helping work with other folks on in other areas such as app admins, communications, the PM who's really helping shepherd everything along, as well as partnering with our campus IT partners because we're very centralized in our university. So we have central IT, but we also have different colleges and departments that have their own IT support over there that do not directly report up to our IT structure. So we partner with them to understand what the impact of these quotas the, and direct outreach to some of those folks that are impacted directly in those colleges and departments. And then also a big thing is the support of senior leadership that has really helped champion why we are doing this in the first place. In a lot of cases, there has been a cost savings element that has really motivated us to do this, or at least being proactive about a lot of the cost changes that have been occurring across Google, Microsoft, and other areas that have led to it. So in some cases, we're cleaning, making a cleanup effort, and then others we're just trying to set quotas to be more proactive. Um, and that impacts our communication directly. We also have our identity and access management folks that are directly involved because with a lot of these services, it depends on how the person is licensed, whether they're a faculty staff person, whether it's a student employee, or an affiliate and a vendor we're working with. So it really varies across the board. And then we want to make sure that it's streamlined across all of our services to make sure that it's consistent and not too far off what quotas we're setting in other areas. And then support is really key because they're the front lines helping field any questions that we get. So we're creating knowledge-based articles and a lot of documentation to help try to make it as self-service as possible so people know what they can do on their own and lessen the burden on our help desk. So a big part of what we have done to really drive the why we're doing this in the first place is just doing a ton of analysis on our current usage and then also where we're trending in terms of where our storage might be in case we don't take any action. So specifically, we're looking at, okay, we noticed that in Zoom, for example, we have a small subset of users that are using the bulk of our storage right now. And so we've checked on average how much storage are people using depending on the type of user that they are. We find faculty and staff tend to use a little bit more. Student employees don't need to use as much per se. So we might have a lower quota for them depending on what the average behavior looks like across different user types. And then also we've conducted retention simulations, depending on whether if we set a certain quota for SharePoint, how much storage is that really going to save us based off of where we're trending? And also, is it really going to meet the need for the bulk of the population based off of where things are going in the future? And then we've also looked at benchmarking data compared to other universities. So specifically right now with our Zoom cloud storage, we don't have a retention in place right now. We are going to be working on a big communication and change management effort to try to get that out there. We have looked at other universities and what is common and what is reasonable to set out there, and we've kind of shared those simulations up with leadership to see which buy-in is appropriate for that. So, tips that I've noticed across the board that would be helpful to keep in mind, at least for me when I think about it, because it kind of seems like we're making another stop on the road with each project where we're kind of going through this, and there's a lot of themes that I've noticed. So, in certain cases, we're trying to pilot as much as we can and get it out there. So, for example, with our storage quotas for Outlook and Exchange Online, we tested out archiving mailboxes and we had a test group to do that for a while just to see what kind of questions people had related to that. And we also did the same thing with SharePoint as well. I've noticed that it's the technical change itself is really fast. Like it's easy to turn on a retention setting in SharePoint or OneDrive, but really it's just more focused on communication and the change management of it. In the case of like Zoom, for example, it's a behavior change where people are who maybe have never had to clean up their recordings before or check about what's getting deleted before. Now we're going to encourage people that, hey, you're going to have to start looking at your recordings on a cadence to see what you need, what you don't need, and then figure out where it's appropriate to migrate your recordings in case you want to retain it for whatever reason. So the timing to implement the change and when to communicate has been pretty critical. So so based off of the analysis that we've seen, so for example, with Zoom, we've noticed that the bulk of our storage is being used by about 20% of our users right now, and the bulk of those users are actually faculty staff. So we are purposely trying to communicate with them within the semester so that they have enough time to migrate their data. And in the summertime, we don't we're going to be communicating with them, but a lot of like adjuncts and faculty are gone in the summertime. So we're not going to get the most impact in terms of people actually taking action and doing anything and offering support as much as we could with a lot of people being gone. So being able to communicate at the right time has been pretty critical. And then also, we don't want people to have alert fatigue from communicating. Like I think it's always better to communicate more often than not, but we don't want to communicate too much where they end up just ignoring it altogether and feel like there's no action that they need to take at all. So we've been very mindful of trying to find that balance. And then again, user guidance that we've tried to provide. What do you currently have versus what the new quota is? I find so far in my experience in higher education that are really, people are a little sensitive to feeling like if they might be getting something taken away from them. So we've tried to really think about that and be thoughtful about that as we're communicating in terms of we might be taking something away in one area, but we're giving you something else here. And then in certain cases, when it's appropriate, we will have an exception process. That is not true across the board. We're not going to have an exception process with Zoom because we really don't want people treating Zoom as a storage location per se. But if there's a business need for SharePoint, we will allow that. So it really depends on what is appropriate. But really holistically, I think the biggest thing that is would be the most helpful for our end users, which is currently being developed, is a storage finder tool that says if you have a certain use case or a X thing that you want to do, where is it appropriate to put it? Is it appropriate to put it in Panopto where we have our instructional and course material? Does it make sense to put it in SharePoint, OneDrive, one of the local file shares, depending on what you want to do? Is it appropriate in Google? What are my options? And what are the best practices on an institutional level, I think is what would be helpful for most users based off of who we've talked to. And then also we do have open Slack channels for ad hoc communication so people can ask questions as the changes are rolling out. And I found that that's been really helpful for people to not have to wait and submit a ticket for doing that all the time. And then we do have published policies that we've been leaning on. So we have a records retention policy that is out there. And then also our information security office has an information handling matrix, which identifies all of the services that are available. And depending on whether the data classification, in our case, whether it's public, internal, private, or confidential, then there's certain applications where the ISO says it's okay to put those files in there or not as a guide. So. Okay, that was a mouthful, but I'm happy to answer questions once we get through everybody else's presentation. But with that in mind, I will stop sharing and I will pass it over to Chris.
All right, thanks, Emmy. So at University of North Carolina, Greensboro, we started this data retention project, and to me, I kind of think that it's really a non-retention project if you think about it, because what we're talking about is getting rid of data. We only want to retain that data that we have to retain. Um, One of my first slides here is just some notes that I took on we take demands, any kind of work effort, we consider a demand. So our demand to project handoff notes here, these are just some notes that I made here. So you can kind of understand the life cycle of the project. This was in April of 2025. They said we need to implement this by July of 2026. Otherwise, we're going to incur a significantly large bill from Microsoft for our storage. So I guess we have a 3-year contract, and that contract was going to be up, and they were going to look at our storage. And we had been adding data throughout our 3 years with Microsoft. So specifically, what we were looking at is OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and Outlook. The idea was that we'd enact this mass delete configuration that's available in Microsoft there, and they wanted to have 1 year of communication to let people know and let people prepare their data. They wanted to offload their data, or they wanted to be able to classify that data. So obviously what we're thinking about here is the organizational change management, getting the change culture, getting people to think about their data differently. In fact, I'll take a little tangent here. We heard that some folks were using their email as their storage. So if you had an attachment in there, rather than going to a file in OneDrive or SharePoint, they would go to their emails and pull up these different files that were part of attachment. So we wanted to teach and kind of get the culture doing things a little bit differently. In order to make this big change, though, what we realized we needed was a policy. And we weren't aware of a policy, so the at least our business analyst who scoped this out said that we were going to have to establish a policy, get it published, make sure it's accessible. He had thought that the guidelines and our current thought at that time, our thought was that we would retain items for about 3 years. So he thought that there were some exceptions to that, but that that policy had already been somewhat approved by our executive steering committee. After the policy was established and published, then we need to communicate that. And again, we wanted a year of communication. So that really backed us up. If we're going to implement this on July 1st of 2026, then we really need to start that communication before July 1st of 2025. In addition to that, we talked about different methods of communication. So we talked about webinars, town hall meetings, office hours, all kinds of ways that we could reach out to folks and make sure they got the information, and also make sure they felt like they were able to ask questions and get our kind of leadership in what they should do with their data. Part of the solution would be to craft this labeling system within Microsoft so that you could label folders or documents. For example, if it was HR data, that you could label a folder that is HR data, and then it would have a longer retention period. I had asked our BA if this was something we're going to have to custom develop. And he said, no, all this was out of the box. It happens in Microsoft Purview. So that sounded great. And again, the idea was that we turn this on June 30th and it'd run every night and it would delete on a nightly basis. We identified some of our resources or subject matter experts here. Our systems architect, who manages our Azure and Microsoft licensing and configurations. We also had two ITS communications people, one who specializes in that organizational change management and one who handles more on the training side of that. And training would be involved in the labeling and this new idea of having to label folders and those kind of things. In addition, though, what we found was that a lot of folks had their data saved in OneDrive when it was really departmental data. So they would create a departmental document in OneDrive. They would share that from their OneDrive, but it never really made it to SharePoint. So we wanted to have some kind of training that would encourage folks how to properly use OneDrive for your more work-related but personal kind of documents and data, SharePoint for longer-term departmental kind of data, and Exchange or Outlook for emails and not for storing data there. And of course, we realized that we're going to need our support folks to be able to help us out. Our CISO and one of the security engineers on the project team there. But in addition, we also reached out to the Office of General Counsel and our university archivist. What we found in doing that was that we already had a records retention policy, 132 pages of records retention policy. It breaks it down. HR has, I'm going to guess, 25 pages because every single type of HR document is listed in this retention policy. But this is from our UNC system office. So it's something that we could also use it for justification. This is one of the reasons why we need to implement this change. It's not just about that we have too much data that we're storing, but also because retention policy says that you shouldn't retain it past a certain period. It almost seemed like we were a solution in search of a problem. And by that, I mean that we knew that we had too much data, and we were trying to implement this feature in Microsoft, but we really didn't understand what the problem exactly was. And we kind of, as we got into the organizational change management kind of principles here, we talked about how we were going to, because this is going to be a big change, how are we going to get our users to buy in on this? So we said leadership, absolute must that we had leadership committed to this. We needed to be sure that when we went to our faculty that we had the provost backing, because if the faculty push back and the provost isn't behind us, then we have a problem. Obviously, I'm sure you all know that. So one of the things that we did was we started having early meetings with leadership, university leadership first, to make sure that they understood why we needed to do this, and also that they were behind us, but also to get their feedback too, to get their input, to see if there's something special that they needed or anyone in their groups needed. Faculty members, for example, we have a lot of researchers, so we've got a separate segment for research that is retained differently than other departments. But like I talked about, the cultural alignment, making sure that we've impressed upon our clients why we need to do this, why this change is necessary. Part of that was the clear communication. So the big pieces here are the why and the what. And I'll tell you that within a group of PMs here, and hopefully you can relate to this, but our technical folks can tell you what all day long, but not so much sometimes about the why. Really kind of selling this as to why we need to do this. For our technical folks to just simply say it just costs too much, that's not an answer that some of the faculty members are going to accept. But when we get into some of the other issues here, and we'll talk about those, then we really get into the why we need to do this, and hopefully it brings it home to different populations there. And the people-centric. So we wanted to make sure that we provided training if it was needed for anyone who needed to understand the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint, or this labeling system that we were going to implement. We wanted to make sure we considered training there to make sure we were focused on the people and the users. And the structured approach. So we wanted to break this into phases to make sure that we understood what we were doing. We communicate that. We make sure we get the settings. I think Emmy said that the technical piece here ended up being pretty simple. But it's the cultural change that's really the big change here. So we talked about this, we had our plan all laid out, and then what we found was that from our leadership, university leadership, ITS had pushed some other initiatives onto the university, and I intentionally say we pushed them onto the university. We thought that this is what the university needs, this is what's best, and the university kind of let us know that we needed to pump the brakes. So our leadership told the project team, pump the brakes, slow down a little bit. Here are these other projects that we've implemented recently here, and we're getting this change fatigue. So it was a good thing. It gave us a chance to kind of really reconsider some things here. And one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure we communicated really well with all of our constituents. So we decided we were going to do this presentation. We were going to create this presentation that all the information that was needed for all these various groups that we were going to talk to. So we put together a schedule here. Again, there's just a high level kind of schedule here that we wanted to talk to our Chancellor's Council, Executive Steering Committee, Provost Council. Then we want to get broader into town halls. Our DTSs are our decentralized technology staff. So we wanted to make sure we had their buy-in and we were introducing it to them. And then we got their questions too and their feedback before we took it out to faculty and other staff members. We had this timeline now that we were going to implement our, what we figured were these low impact changes there. If you see in scope there, it's 1 through 4 there. One of the things I think that's important here is that we realized that, let me talk about quotas. We have quotas, but we don't truly allow people to manage their quotas, because even if they delete a document, it goes to recycle bin. Even if they empty the recycle bin, it doesn't get deleted. So we weren't really allowing our users to manage their quotas. So what we did was we said, okay, the first 4 things here are pretty low impact, maybe even no impact. If you want to delete a document, you delete the document, empty your recycling, and it's gone. And that was, again, low impact. Those are users intend to delete those documents there. We still needed to really flesh out, though, what the problem is and what these other possible solutions might be. What are the other schools doing in the system? And we had some users. We talked about some of the high data users. Some folks were keeping videos. I think our athletics folks were keeping videos in SharePoint. And we said, are there other options for them to be able to use? So while we're working through all this, and because we pumped the brakes, we pushed out our implementation date there. It gave us time to really kind of break up these meetings. So it worked out kind of well. I scheduled meetings every 2 weeks, and we started talking about really focusing on this meeting. What do we want to do? We really wanted to define the problem here. The next meeting, we wanted to talk about solutions. Again, with our technical folks here, and it just seemed to me like we weren't really vetting the problem and the solution really well that was understandable to our users. And we brought our communications team in there, and they kind of felt the same thing, that we really needed to get more of the why are we doing this? And just as a project management tool here, one of the things I did, I created these PowerPoint slides, and I said, hey, you know, let's focus on really expanding on this data storage exceeding limits here. Give me the description. How do we really relate this to our users? What are some of the possible solutions here? What are the other schools doing here? And what I wanted to do is be able to put it into that chart there so that we could really all have the same messaging. So we went through our meetings here, one meeting focusing on the problem, one meeting focusing on the solutions, and another meeting focusing on what other schools are doing. But again, it just didn't seem like we were really getting to the root of the problem there. So we added this other one. What does success look like? When we're done with this, we turn on the feature. How do we know that we've done something really good here? And that was to get the measurement, get the data that we've got now. How much data do we have in OneDrive? How much do we have in SharePoint? How much do we have in Exchange? That was pretty straightforward. We had a nice graph there. But I'll tell you, this is about the time that the light bulb really went off when I asked folks to really get some detailed numbers for us so we could really show progress and show that we've achieved something. When they came back and they said, you know what, we're retaining data for deleted accounts. So students that were here 5, 10 years ago, we still had their data in there. Faculty members that left 5 years ago, we still had their data in there. So their accounts were deleted, but their data was being retained here in OneDrive. And what we found was that's 197 terabytes is almost half of our storage. And simply by dealing with that, we can eliminate the additional costs that we're going to incur July 1st. So all of a sudden now we shifted our strategy and presentation, changed scope of the project to add deleting data from deleted accounts and making that one of the key emphasis of the project. So we got together with our presentation here. On the right there, you can see our important dates there. And really, I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the different groups that we're talking to here. So I mentioned our leadership, our decentralized technology staff. We're publishing a web page, and we're also going to do a news item here that we send out regularly. Our CAB meetings are Change Advisory Board. They're open to everyone at the university. So we have a lot of technology interested people that attend those meetings. So we're going to make the announcement in April, talk about what we're calling these low impact changes here. But in the presentation, what we did was we created it and structured it so depending on which group is being talked to, the presenter can pick out a variety of slides. So for example, I think that the why is this important now slide, I think that I thought that there was a cost estimate to that one. So if we're presenting to more of leadership, we want to really emphasize that we're going to save over $100,000 by implementing this, just getting rid of the deleted accounts, the data associated with deleted accounts there. We also, depending on what group we're talking to, we might want to bring up our peer institutions, talk about what they're doing. As far as our technical solution goes, again, we've changed scope, and what we've kind of nailed it down to is that for email, older than 1 year just goes to an archive mailbox, and that's classified and I guess measured differently for storage purposes. Users can now delete their own emails, or they'll be able to here coming up, and then we'll keep all email for 5 years that isn't deleted, and then it'll get purged after 5 years. For OneDrive, we're going to do the training that I talked about to help folks to move their department-related data over to SharePoint, but also we're going to turn on the ability for users to delete their own data if they want to. It'll go to the recycle bin for a year, and then it'll be deleted. And then our long-term, next year, July of 2027, since we're not in such a rush for that, since we found the solution for avoiding that additional cost incurring, we're going to be able to delay turning on this automated deletion of records and data until next year, July of 2027. So, and we've picked out from the retention period, from the retention policies there, that 5 years is good for most people, and HR and some other, I think HR and police, and there's some other groups obviously that have special retention periods, and of course our VIPs. We're going to retain their data pretty much forever. And then SharePoint, we're going to classify departments so that their retention periods are based on the department and the function there, and they'll be able to go in and label something as an exception, or label a folder as an exception, or give it a different retention period there. But for the most part, I think departments are 5 years as well. The other piece that's kind of relevant here is that we realize that our students, we don't really need to delete their data. Now that, like, again, now that we've solved the big hurdle there with just getting rid of the deleted account data, we're not really needing to nitpick too much. And students, because of their life cycle, when they leave the university, their data will be retained for a year. And after a year, when their account's been disabled for a year, their account gets deleted, their data will get deleted too. So we're kind of anticipating we're not going to need to turn on this automatic deletion for students. But the other big thing here is that we want questions. We want to take those questions, and I'll kind of give you a little example here. We have this University Initiatives website. We list all of our projects there. You won't see the data retention project there yet because we decided that we're not going to publish this until we take it out to our next meeting that we have. Is the next level down is our Campus Technology Initiatives meeting. So we're going to introduce it there. We've got our ABC who's going to present there. And after that, we'll publish our website. Our website for the project is over on the right there. It's much longer than that, but the key points on the website there that I really like are, one, the FAQs. So we're collecting questions from folks, being able to put it into FAQs. But the other piece is that we've got a button here that goes to a Microsoft form to collect those questions. So if someone has a question, they can submit the question. We can answer the question personally, but also make that a part of our FAQs. The only other thing that kind of comes to mind that I want to point out is with our technical folks, they talk about this Microsoft configuration as the policy in Microsoft. And that has gotten into it just gets confusing. So what I've tried to do is encourage them to use, configuration or setting. I think Emmy said, setting. I think that's better for folks, for our users, our clients to understand than the policy, because when we refer to the policy as a user, I would think that they're thinking the policy is that manual, that 132 page is our policy. So just a point of interest there that I thought alleviated some of the confusion once we started talking about features or settings as opposed to the Microsoft policy. But with that, I will stop sharing and I'll turn it over to John.
All right. Thank you, Chris. I am, as I pull up my share, going to take it from a little bit of a different angle in that my role has changed over the years since I've been at Notre Dame, where I previously was a project manager and had the depth that Chris and Emmy went into. Whereas now I look at it and I come in a little bit more from a customer perspective. So let me go ahead and get this back into slideshow mode over here. So I'm just going to talk a little bit lighter and focus on the change management aspects of what we have and what we've been doing at Notre Dame, because I think that's really where we sort of excelled in, that is that investment. As Chris talked about change fatigue, looking at the amount of data and latching on and giving people the ramp. I think those are some of the things we have. So, for me, I'm distributed IT right now. I'm out in an organization. Our central IT is leading the charge on this. It's not my project. It's not my team's work, but I'm a recipient of the work. And we talk about why we're doing it. There are security reasons why we should have been doing this many, 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 many years ago, like we've heard folks say. But until it became a cost issue, that's really what the kick in the pants is to get it done. So when there's real dollars associated with it. So before it was, oh, storage is free, do what you want. Save it. And that's where it hits my random fact, which is sometimes you end up near the family business and you don't realize it. I came from a family of records managers. So there's the legal aspects like Chris was talking about that we look and see, and understanding that deleting things too quickly, we think about oops there, but holding on to things too long is definitely an issue too. And that's when it opens up things when we get into the ideas around what happens with records retention and with potential legal actions and digging in and discovery. So we want to be mindful of that. I think those are some of the things that are being conveyed to us as customers. So just to emphasize, Like Mongo, I'm just a pawn in this. And that can tell, we don't have a lot of cameras on, but that's usually how I can tell people's age and background if they catch the reference or not. So what we have at Notre Dame, I'm going to touch on two separate things. One is our overall data stewardship initiative, and then the other is something that I am actually doing that I do own in my area because I do have data and have um, had some deep work and that started a few years ago and is ongoing now. So this is university level. Um, we look at it truly at a program level. Again, Chris had mentioned change fatigue, and I talk about death by a thousand cuts, where people think you keep making a change, and then you make another change, then you make another change, then you make another change. That what we've seen is it tends to work better when you say we have this thing going on that is a storage initiative. And from that, you are going to see multiple steps, multiple occurrences along the way. So you see it as elements of a single change, not a thousand different changes that are happening to you. That's one of the ways that I think we've been effective at managing this and having everything come through it. The other thing too, I don't have I didn't link in. We have a video that I can, I'll share based on the links that you can get to, but off of our website, the idea is storage doesn't just, and data stewardship doesn't just mean delete all your stuff. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. So it may be, where are the things that we use on a regular basis, that we need right available to us all the time? Where are the things that, can be up in an attic or in a basement that we pull out once or twice a year? And where are the things that can go into archive mode that, yep, we want them from a history, and then what are the things that we can delete? Right now, at least in my organization, all of that stuff lives together. So trying to find something that's a record versus something that was a work product from 20 years ago, and that's how we define our processes as, it's a mess. So it's forcing us to be better in that as well. So the key elements that we're looking at, this is going to sound really familiar as I'm the third person talking about this now. But we're looking at our overall storage. We're a Google shop versus Microsoft, but we do have some OneDrive use. Understanding what goes into a My Drive versus a shared drive. We've had Box for larger storage that's going to be retired. So it's cleaning up what we have, setting limits on it, but it's also retirement stuff. We look at retirees from the university have had full-on Google accounts for years and years. They're going to be transitioning to Gmail-only accounts. What's fun is that our central IT organization is coming to me for help on this, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. And then folks with ridiculously large storage, yeah, if you really need it for that, you can pay for it. And we had one of those accounts within our organization where, again, is Google Drive really the best place to store all of your multimedia files, or are there better options? And that's one of the things that we're working on right now, internal to us, is moving those over to a better option for storage. One of the things that I've noticed since I got to Notre Dame is they like to gamify things, make it fun, make it, adding an element of cartoon competition. We are a very competitive bunch here at the university. So looking at that and seeing it of how can we do it? So we had a couple of years ago, I mean, that's how long it's been going, is we started with a Conquer Your Clutter Challenge, which is just, hey, here are ways that you can be better. We knew at the top level that part of this was to get people to clean out their storage and start on that process for where we're going years later. So, but we gamified it. We put out, you could see weekly tips were put out, week 1, week 2. So it was an 8-week program, just teaching you stuff. And what's great is this stuff persists so that I've been able to share it with other areas outside of just our employee or our staff areas here at the university. My favorite is, my personal favorite, anybody knows me, is I'm an inbox zero type of person. I start to get the shakes if my inbox has more than 100 items in it. I like to have it under 50, under 20, in there. How do you keep that organized? what are the things that you can do? Take a look at your downloads, take a look at those files. Um, we've heard it before. Um, Email is not meant to be storage, it's communications. So the fact that you keeping all those attachments in your email and that's where you go and find them is not it's not meant to be a file system for that. Get those out of there. So yeah, so we work, that's one of the areas there. My area that I mentioned in the Alumni Association, I am the director of IT for our Alumni Association. We have our own alumni Google domain. People have heard me talk about this before in this meeting and other settings. Chris, I kind of laughed when you said, "Hey, we've got 200 terabytes in former student data. We can clean that up. That'll help us out." When I got onto campus 4 years ago, we had 2.2 petabytes of data in our Google domain. And that was right when Google announced that we're going to give you 100 terabytes. We were 22 times over the limit at that time of what we could store. So we had to make some changes and make those changes right away and lead people through an initiative to retire our Google Drive, retire our Google Photos, and move to Gmail only accounts for our alumni. So that's why when I mentioned a few minutes ago that our central IT is coming to us asking us questions of how we did it, because we've done it. And that bought us some time. And we did get within our limits there. But now what we've run into is we're still inching up there, and we have some people who are very heavy Gmail users, and they are using it for file storage and freaking out when we just announced that we're giving everybody 2 GB quotas on their Gmail. Yes, that is about 1/8 the size that you can get in 30 seconds by signing up for a free Google account. We know that. But we have 50,000 plus alumni that have accounts on this system, and we've got to make it viable for everybody. So we encourage things like using it as a forwarding account. Don't keep a copy on the server. So we've been really building and communicating and using our website to be able to emphasize the things that you can do to bring yourself within compliance and maintain that compliance moving forward. I'd love to say everybody loves us and they're accepting of the change. My boss is getting nasty grams. I think before I walked into this meeting, we sent out some communications earlier this week to the folks that are over quota. And my support team, I think we've got a queue of almost 300 tickets in queue right now at our service desk of asking questions related to these changes. So it's there. It's how we manage it, how we can be consistent. One of the things that we do is leverage the web, have one source that we send people through, because that can be one source of truth versus trying to put lots of answers in emails and handling the change at that end. But what we do see, again, we have a few people that are the biggest users of the system. This was great. I had a student team working with us during their last semester as a project management project. We teach a project management class here on campus in our undergraduate school of business. So we were a project that they were able to jump into. So from a resource perspective, remembering we're higher ed, that's one of my tips to go is we have labor pool of people that can help with analysis, communications, different things. Our student group was wonderful. They did a deep analysis, deep dive in. They made recommendations. They drafted communications for us that we're leveraging right now as we're taking the action. So we can see that, I mean, it is the epitome of the 80-20 rule. We have less than 20% of our active accounts using over 80% of our data. And it gets even more. If we have about 55,000 active accounts right now in our Google system, we have 1,500 that are using, about 1,500 people or 2,000 if I add it together, that are using 90% plus of our data. So we are reaching out to them primarily and saying, we need your help here. And we call on their heartstrings because, from an alumni association, this is not just about you. We want to be able to offer this to everybody. And if we're going to be able to continue doing this in the future, everybody needs to give a little bit and live within those rules. So that is what I have on I'm going to escape out of here just to point to a couple links quickly. Again, we've got a website set up that talks about, here's what's going on, here's what you can do. We can dig into our smart storage program that again gives that background, gives access to folks so we can see. We've got a little 3-minute video if anybody is interested after the meeting, that you can go watch on YouTube that talks about storage and the theories behind it. And then again, our Conquer Your Clutter Challenge that was from almost 2 years ago now is out there, and you can see some of those tips that we have of what to do. So it says go in, tackle your downloads, and it jumps right into our ServiceNow system to be able to say, here's what to do, and it provides instructions how to get there. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Christina, who will help with any Q&A and next steps for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank John, Chris, and Emmy for sharing all about your projects. I know we're in the same boat at George Mason, and a lot of that really resonated with me. And so we do have a question, John. I think this one's for you about forwarding concerns from a security standpoint. Do you have any concerns about that, or because it's alumni, not really?
These on our alumni side from a forwarding, we don't have any security concerns because they are like from our stuff, because these are much like people's personal accounts at that stage. So we don't consider them, it's not like moving university data into another system. The rougher thing that we get in there, and we're encouraging people, set up your own, it's a Gmail account, set up your own Gmail account that's full functioned, and then push this data over there so you can still send as your alumni. But some of the email systems are they're kind of cracking down on some of that forwarding. But because we're trying to encourage it from within Google and within their ecosystem, we haven't seen as much problem there. But again, it's not because it's their data versus like looking at business data for the university. The forwarding side of it is truly at the alumni level.
Thank you. Our next question is for all the presenters. Were affected departments responsible for ensuring data that must be retained longer than the default had an exception or a longer retention period applied? Was that a user-initiated request or collaborative with the team? And Jason, if you need to clarify, feel free to unmute.
Yeah, just with the use of labeling and or, setting a retention policy for SharePoint, OneDrive, we're looking at very similar options. And I'm curious, how do you set the responsibility, especially if you don't know what the data, business need is or potential retention obligations? Is it on that department or the user to review and understand that and apply a label, move it to a different folder, et cetera?
I can try to answer it, at least from a Rochester RIT standpoint. So for SharePoint, for what we did, it's pooled storage for us. There's a set quota that we have per site, and then people can request an increase for that. They do need to provide a business reason for it, and then it's reviewed by the team that is the service owner team, which is the app admin team for SharePoint, and then they assess whether it's valid or not. Most of the time they have a consulting session with that team or department before they approve it. But as long as it's not impacting the rest of our pooled storage, they tend to get it approved. But retaining the data as it applies to our records retention policy is the responsibility of the owner of the SharePoint site. It's not the responsibility of the administration. And we make that clear even when we create a site for different areas and stuff. We always try to have at least 2 administrators and set the tone that the responsibility is theirs about what the data is in there. So with our Institute audit department, if there are any questions that come up related to who has access to what's there and where are they offloading it to, it's the responsibility of them. And they have all the reports and the usage for that to be able to track that. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Emmy.
And I'll just add to that. We actually just had this come up yesterday, and we were talking about that. The exception process is going to be interesting for us. I think one of the things that we want to do though is first make sure that it's out of the OneDrive and into SharePoint. So the exceptions apply to SharePoint because it's departmental kind of data. But then the question came up like, well, what about the provost's office that handles tenure certification for faculty members? So it's not part of our HR. I guess we're kind of unique in that we've got HR for staff and we've got provost faculty office for the faculty folks there. So it's like their own HR. So we do have some other folks that are going to need HR retention record policies applied that aren't part of our HR department. So
Thank you, Chris. Our next question is about shared drives, and I'm also going to add to this a little bit. So, if anybody implemented shared drives for departments as part of this project, if you did, how did you structure? Whoop, my chat is moving. And then how do you structure it from a deployment and fairness of storage allocation perspective? So one thing we're starting to do at George Mason is move away from on-prem shared drives. What we had was like end of life, so we transitioned to another solution. And John knows because he was here for it or around the time. So we do have some on-prem storage, but it's not something we plan to keep long term. But what we try to do is differentiate between your Me space, your OneDrive, and your We space, which would be your SharePoint, Microsoft Teams. So if it is departmental and needs to be shared, it should be in Teams or SharePoint. And we also have a tool called MyHub that helps us with managing the creation of these workspaces in SharePoint and Teams. And it takes you through a process that where if there's highly sensitive data, then you consult with our ITSO department. And that also has a retention policy applied to it. So we're able to say after a year of the space being created, do you plan on archiving this space or does it need to stay active? And then we'll be implementing another process to actually delete those archived spaces after a period of time as well. So that's what we're doing for shared spaces. But Emmy, Chris, or John, if you want to talk about what you all are doing as well.
I would just add in, it's a little different perspective there because, like you pointed out, I think that shared drives are more like a Google kind of thing. And we just transitioned from Google, I think, 3 years ago. So I was familiar with that, but we are really focused on getting people to put their data into the right place there. OneDrive is for stuff I work on, but once I produce something, it should go into my department SharePoint. So maybe that's more like the shared drive kind of idea.
Yeah, and then for us, so in our case, we've always allowed people to pretty much put their department stuff wherever they wanted to, as long as it's not public facing or on like a hosted site or something. But we've been trying to shift people more to use SharePoint, but it depends on sort of your org structure. So within ITS, we have multiple departments within that, and we've been trying to shift more of our departmental, like sort of intranet information into SharePoint now. And with that comes bigger conversations from our leadership level on like naming conventions, what items should really be available for everybody across ITS versus specific just to your department. So that's still evolving, but I think the storage allocation is still going to be the same regardless of whether it's for a department shared drive or not, which is in our case for SharePoint, if it was self-created, which people could do that before out of like Outlook or something, it was 5 gigs. If they request it to be created by our app admin team, then they get 50 gigs. If they want something beyond that, then it's assessed by that team for more. But we do allow it, and it's just kind of you get 50 gigs unless there's a compelling reason beyond that. But I also think too that some of it is with the usage, I think, which Christina had talked about, which is if there's an inactive site or it hasn't been touched in a while, then we won't do that. We also had some sites that before we actually started putting hard policies on it, that students kind of got out of control a little bit with that we're trying to wrangle in a little bit. So some of those sites are going to be communicated that we're retaking back some of that because it's not appropriate. But the storage is pretty much the same for regardless of whether for it's a department or not in our case. So I don't know if that's helpful or not. Maybe not. Oh,
John, I think you're about to leave, so unless you want to say something else, I was just
Yep.
going to say thank you so
Nope.
much.
Oh, you're welcome. No, I was going to just, the quick build on that of our shared drives are all over the place, as Chris said. From a Google thing, it's so easy to create them. But one of the things that we've done is we actually use um, groups to manage a lot of our share access, and those are centrally managed too. So it's one of the tips for getting the right people the right access versus having it be all one-offs. So that's kind of my last little thing on there. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. There's one more question about sharing or saving your work on locally on your desktop and whether that's something that's encouraged or prohibited at your universities, or I guess the best practices around that. I know what we usually say is in Microsoft, you want to start working on your document where you want to have it shared, and then always use the links for sharing so you're not constantly emailing the same file over and over. Um, but Chris or Emmy, do you have any thoughts on saving work on files on the desktops?
I do it all the time. So I think it's totally fine. It doesn't hit our storage and we don't have to pay for it because it's a part of it. But it depends. So in our case, we give people the option to sync their desktop to their OneDrive. So if people want to have that automatic sync happen, it happens. Otherwise, it's totally fine because if someone leaves or something happens, then by default, like as long as HR approves it, your manager or whoever needs to access it can get to those files anyway. So it doesn't matter, I think. But you could totally just have working documents on your desktop. I don't think anything's wrong with that at all. So
Yeah,
Thank
I've
you.
got just two thoughts on, John's point made me think about structure. And when he talked about, using groups to manage who has access to the folders and those kind of things there. So, and kind of to your point there, making sure that your document goes to the right place so it's shared with the right people. One of the other things that we saw with Google Drive, or if somebody creates something and shares it out of their OneDrive, is that once that, say, a staff member is no longer with you, that account gets deleted. In Google, you don't have access to the document anymore, or you may not have access to the document anymore. That document, depending on your retention policies, may go away if it's owned by the creator who's no longer here. So by taking something out of my OneDrive, putting it in SharePoint, it'll live forever for the department. So,
yeah, something we did for Google Drive, which is pretty fresh, is for Drive any Google Drives that are out there, we have run like a script where if they don't have a manager assigned to them, a manager of the drive, not necessarily a manager in title, then it is put on a list to potentially go to read only and then be deleted so we can retrieve that storage back. So we've started to do that as a way to get some of our storage back so that way there's somebody that can answer questions about what's going on with it. So we're currently in the middle of doing that, and then now it's just a part of our the ongoing life cycle of a Google Share Drive now.
We only have a minute left. I want to say thank you again so much to our presenters today, our panels. Great discussion. I think it's something everybody is probably dealing with. Quick updates. I wanted to let you all know that our next meeting in March will focus on using Team Dynamics as a project management tool. So again, I think Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our hope is to have another kind of panel discussion. And I think Ed is one of those presenters as well. So we'll have that discussion on Team Dynamics as a tool. Our April meeting, we'll talk about data, using data to tell a story. So to, tell the story of your project and help people understand what's happening and what's going on. So we have a guest speaker for that. We'll share more information in our group on Connect. So please check that out. And if there's any more discussion that you want to carry over from today's meeting, then please feel free to add that in our Connect space. Thank you again, everybody. Oh, and then I think Educause is probably going to start asking for proposals soon for the conference. So if anybody's interested in hosting a workshop or a session, I would start thinking about that now and preparing for that proposal submission. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.